Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of YWC Edmonton and the Searching for Izena project, I want to warmly welcome you to today's panel discussion about the fascinating history of female leadership at the City of Edmonton and the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. My name is Aram Afsar, and I'm a YWCA Edmonton board member. During the day, I'm Director of Enforcement with the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists in Alberta. I've also proudly served on multiple boards in Edmonton and across Alberta, including currently as Municipal Councillor for Kananaskis Improvement District. Before it begins today's event, I want to respectfully acknowledge that YWCA Edmonton is located on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous groups and peoples, including the Niawak, the Cree, the Niitsitapi, the Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. Thanks again for joining us today. The Searching for Izena project is proud to host today's conversation because not only are we celebrating the 100th anniversary this year of the first woman, Izena Ross, being elected to Edmonton City Council, but our volunteers are also working hard, City Council, but our volunteers are also working hard to find ways to encourage more women to seek public office and roles at decision-making tables across our community. While the Searching for Izena project has concentrated primarily on telling the story of female leadership at Edmonton City Hall over the last century, a 101-year-old letter we unearthed during our research has helped lead us today to today's important discussion. In 1920, a year before Izena Ross made history by becoming Edmonton's first female city councillor, she penned a letter to Edmonton Journal. Back then, Izena was known in our community as a prolific letter writer, and the topic was always the same. She wanted more women to be allowed to serve on board and committees in the city. In this particular letter from 1920, Izena was asking the Edmonton Board of Trade, now the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, to allow its board to also include women. Today's panel will discuss what happened next and the history of female leadership at the Chamber and corporate boardrooms across our city and province. To help guide today's important conversation, we've asked YWCA Edmonton and Searching for Izena committee member, Lisa Holmes, to serve as moderator. Lisa is the former mayor of Morinville and currently the co-founder and chief operating officer of Diplomat Consulting, a full-service public affairs and communications company based in Edmonton. It's important to note that Lisa is also an incredible and dogged researcher and not only unearthed Izena's letter from 1920, but also stories of past female leaders at Edmonton's Chamber of Commerce. Before I turn it over to Lisa, I just want to also acknowledge that I do understand that current City Councillor Andrew Knack is in attendance. So welcome, and welcome to everyone else who's listening from home. So Lisa, over to you. Please get us started.
Well, thank you very much, Aram, and welcome everyone. I'm looking forward to having this conversation today. We've been really excited about the opportunity to be able to promote and tell the stories of women in leadership across the city. And this is another opportunity for us to be able to focus not just on the Searching for Izena project and political leadership, but also to expand into the world of business and to look at what it was like to be a female business owner, a female business leader throughout the decades. And some of the examples we have of amazing female business leaders today are joining us as well. So to kick it off, I wanted to just introduce a little bit more about the Searching for Izena project. It started earlier this year and came to fruition a partnership between the YWCA Edmonton and Parity Yeg. And it's in celebration of the fact, like Aram said, that we are looking at the 100th anniversary of the first female elected to City Council, Izena Ross in 1921. And it was during this research that we did find a lot of documentation about Izena and the different pieces of history that she had touched or been involved with. And we like to say at our committee that really Izena is touched everything. She's really involved in the city and different committees and the fabric of who we are. And so, going back to 1920, the city of Edmonton had a population of 61,045 people. It was growing and developing, and women were really coming into the forefront of who they were as people, obviously with the person's case, but also with who they were as business leaders and looking at their roles as family, but also as outside of the home in careers. So back then, the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce was known as the Edmonton Board of Trade. And in 1920, they were doing a campaign to try to raise their membership up to 1,000 members. And Izena Ross at the time was the secretary of a group called the Edmonton Local Council of Women. That organization and its president at the time, who was Nellie McClung, decided at their meeting that they wanted to petition the Edmonton Board of Trade to allow women to become members, and that this was a great opportunity to do so because of the fact that they were doing a membership recruitment at the time. So Izena, as the secretary of the organization, penned this letter that was reprinted, like Aram said, in the Edmonton Journal, but sent to the committee as well for them to consider. And the response she got in 1920 was that there was going to be an election at the Board of Trade within the week, and that they were looking at the next board that was going to be installed would be considering that question. Now, being a researcher and someone who loves history and stories, I couldn't just let it go there. I wanted to know whether Izena Ross's request was fulfilled. And we did. We found out that the first female member of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce was installed in 1945. Her name was Kundingrud Rule, and with her husband, she owned two businesses, the Carlton Apartments and the International Hotel, which was located across the street from what is now EPS headquarters downtown. She joined the Edmonton Chamber because she was the business owner and operator. Her husband died, and her children ran the two hotels and the apartment building on their own. And so she wanted to join so that she could be a part of an organization that would support her as a leader in business. And it was really interesting that it took that long. I mean, obviously 1920 to 1945 is a bit of time, but like we know, things do like to change very slowly in the city and municipal politics as well as in business. And so we were really excited to be able to see and find the story of Mrs. Rule. And then also to learn that in 1960, there were 13 members that were female that were part of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. And we also are really excited about taking the opportunity over the next little while through social media to tell you their stories. They have been incredible women. These stories of women in business are inspirational. They're women like Miss Renee Hobbins, who was a well-known florist in the city and someone who established what is kind of the floral district in the industry in our space. But there was also incredible women that inherited businesses through their family, or perhaps they had worked in their business with their husband who had passed away, and then they had taken it over and really wanted support and help, which they found at the chamber. Another really interesting story is the fact that there was a woman named Mrs. Renee Pettypiece. And this is a story of what Edmonton business is all about. She moved here as a young woman. She wanted to be a court stenographer. She had trained for that. She realized that she couldn't because there was a law in Alberta that meant that women were not allowed in courtrooms as stenographers at the time. So instead of going and doing that, she created her own business where she employed over 100 women at the height of her company in the 1950s and 60s that went out and did offer stenography and secretarial services. So we have an incredible history of women in business in Edmonton, and the fact that this kicked it off through the Searching for Izena project, we are really excited about, but we also wanted to ensure that we had really the opportunity to have this conversation about what life is like for a female in business in Edmonton and what life is like in the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce today. So I'm very excited that we're going to be having two discussions on our panel today. We have Janet Riopel, who is well known in our city. She's currently the president and CEO of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. She has deep roots in our community and considerable experience in managing complex and multi-stakeholder projects. Her community service has brought her a lot of recognition, well-deserved. She was honored with things like the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal. She has twice been named one of Alberta's most 50 influential people, and she was a Global Television's Women of Vision. She's also received the UDI's Merit Award and the City of Edmonton's Outstanding Service Award. She is a member of the International Women's Forum, and as well, she is a member of the Institute of Corporate Directors. Janet is just so unbelievable and obviously a role model to many of us in the community. We are also joined today by Dawn Harsh, who is the founder, president, and CEO of Exquisite Senior Living and Care at Home by Exquisite Care and former board chair of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. She has been honored as one of Edmonton's top 40 under 40 and as a global woman of vision. Business in Edmonton magazine named her as one of Canada's top 20 future visionary business leaders. And this past year, she was also awarded a Mayor's Award for design of her senior living home. She is a member of the Alberta Council of Aging, the Alberta Gerontological Association. I know I just said that wrong, Don, I'm sorry. The Alberta Gerontologic, okay, again, sorry. We're gonna have to find out. I'm gonna get you to tell me how to say that word properly. Nurses Association. The same word is in the Canadian Nurses Association, and a registered nurse with the College and Association of Registered Nurses of Alberta. So both of these women are so accomplished, and I'm really excited to get to hear their stories. So please help me welcome Janet and Dawn. Hi, is everyone, just want to make sure everyone's loaded up in here. Okay, perfect. Hello to you both.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, Dawn.
Well,
hello.
So let's start off. Oh, sorry, I can hear myself. So we'll just see. Maybe get one of you to mute. Janet, let's start off with you. Many people know you obviously as the president and CEO of the Edmonton Chamber, and also the fact that you were the first woman to hold this position. But you were also the first women chair of the board in its 108th year history, and you were elected to that position in 1996. So that year brought historic changes that both the Canadian, Alberta, and Edmonton chambers were all being led by women. So I just wondered, it's got to be an amazing story. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? What was it like? What has your experience been with being a female leader in Edmonton?
Well, you know, Lisa, first of all, can I just say bravo to the YWCA and to you for doing this research, taking on this body of work and starting to champion and tell the stories that need to be told. I think it's amazing, and I'm so proud to be part of this. Now, I'll tell you a story about how I got involved with the Chamber of Commerce. I was a businesswoman in Edmonton working in the land development field, which was a very male-dominated industry. I loved it. I functioned and thrived in it, actually, in that field. But there came a point in time where I found that I was really narrow in my vision, and I felt that I needed to broaden my vision, mostly because I had to be able to talk to my kids about their futures in a much more, in a broader way. So I started casting about for what I would do to broaden my vision. And I decided that the two things I should do were join a Rotary Club, a service organization, and join a business group. So the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, you know, rose to the top. And so in 1992, I joined both. Now, just to give you an aside, the Glenora Rotary, the Edmonton Glenora Rotary, was founded in 1990 by women, by Vi Becker, in fact, and it was the first women-led Rotary Club or the second in the world. The first one was in Philippines. So that was a privileged place to be, with a group of dynamic women leaders, and service work became very, very important to me. The next thing I did, of course, as I say, was join the Chamber of Commerce in 1992. I immediately joined a committee because I'll tell you over and over again, get involved, like get really involved if you're going to join organizations. So I joined the Municipal Affairs Committee, and I ended up throughout the course of 1992, I ended up getting really involved, and I was hosting people as I got into events and things like that. Well, guess what? Suddenly we had a female prime minister. Her name was Kim Campbell. Kim Campbell was coming to the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. We were very excited. In fact, it was at the Chateau Lacombe. I'll never forget it. I had a table full of amazing clients that I hosted. And we ended up being horrified. The event ended up being a colossal disaster, and I'll tell you why. Because the people on stage introduced our prime minister, firstly as the first lady, which is completely inappropriate. Secondly, started to tell a history of this woman, and she had come through a lot of challenge in her life, but started to tell this in great detail on this stage, completely inappropriate, nothing you would ever do to a man, let alone a prime minister. And this poor woman had to take the stage, this leader of our country, after this appallingly bad introduction. I can tell you that I could go on and on about this event, and I can tell you though this about it. She conducted herself with grace and dignity. She took the stage and figured out how to diffuse the situation, but we left as members, and I penned a letter immediately saying, I resign from this Chamber of Commerce. I got a call some months later from, well, not even months, I would say weeks, from Ernst & Young, and who had been retained because the board had resigned. It was shameful, it was unacceptable, inexcusable, and they had an overwhelming amount of members and others in the business community that had turned their backs on the Chamber of Commerce. So I ended up being part of a board that got imposed on the membership. We were brought into a room, actually against my will. I didn't want to be in that room, but I did it as a favor to the consultant, who said, the U12 are a good representation of the business community, and we would like you to consider being on this board in a transition role and totally stripping the chamber down and rebuilding it to reflect our modern current realities. You can see from the picture I see up there that by 1996, I had agreed to be elected as the chair of the board. And you know, the rest is history. I've been a member of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce for over 30 years. I can tell you, it was a privilege to be able to lead. It was a privilege to be on a board that could continue to rebuild, modernize the Chamber of Commerce and bring it to a real true reflection of where our community was and where we were headed. I want to tell you something though about Chambers of Commerce before I leave the impression now that we are the old male, pale, stale, Lisa. I want to tell you this about the Chambers of Commerce. We've had 8 female chairs of our board since me, including me. 3 of those have been since I've been here in my role as CEO. And our board now reflects great diversity and a continuation of leadership on our board by female leaders, including, of course, Dawn Harsh, who's here, and now Alan McDonald, who is our chair right now. I can also tell you this, Chambers of Commerce and boards of trade now across our country, I would say women leaders are far more prevalent than male leaders in our business community and in our chamber network. We have 9 chambers right here in our Edmonton metropolitan region. 7 of those are run by women. 7 are led by female leaders. And I believe that we have broken through this barrier in a number of ways, and that we have mouths to go before we sleep, and we always will. So, and let me wrap up one more thing about Kim Campbell, because I'm rambling. Kim Campbell then, when she was past Prime Minister, we were hosted by the Speaker of the House, Stanley Schumacher. I was invited to lunch with her, and I'm sitting beside her wondering what's she going to say about her experience with the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, and now I'm the chair of the board. She acted with her usual dignity, grace, and leadership and said, there are absolutely no hard feelings, and it's about time.
That is so amazing. And it's probably just a story that no one expected to hear from you. When we talk about how your journey started, like what an interesting and opportune time. And obviously, like in every organization, things move and they evolve and they grow. And it's really important that you got to step up at the time you did and really start to establish us as an organization and also as a city that supports women and won't stand for something like that. I can imagine if that happened today, wow, every woman in the audience would be rushing the stage, which would be interesting. Every man in the audience would be rushing the stage now. There would just be no tolerance for this, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty insane. Dawn, obviously, I'm not sure if you have as crazy of a story of how you got involved in the chamber, but you served as chair of the board in the Edmonton Chamber in 2019. And just such an interesting opportunity to be the head of business in the city. So just if you can give us a little bit of insight into your journey and your involvement in the chamber over the years.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And you know what, I'll echo Janet's statement about my honor in being a part of this. And, you know, even from the time it was introduced in the project, I've learned so much about the history of female leadership in and around Edmonton and at the Chamber. And what's interesting is I've been in business for myself for just under 10 years, joined the Chamber right away because it was the thing to do. But since then, I've learned that it is not only the thing to do, it's absolutely essential for small business people. Interestingly, when I was asked to join the Chamber, it had nothing to do with being a female. It had to do with the fact that I was a small business person. And so to me, it just shows how far we've come, even since 1996, when there was this incident with Janet and Kim Campbell. I mean, nothing like that has happened to me in the last 10 years. I just don't even identify, to be honest, with being, you know, in business and being treated differently because I am a woman. So I was approached by individuals who knew me and knew that I was a small business person and knew that I had an industry that was unique in terms of healthcare. And asked if and I was successful in that, and so joined the board. I guess 4 years prior to 2019. And Janet is absolutely right. I did want to step up and be involved on committees right away, and I've had such a great experience with the Chamber. And interesting, you know, you hear these stories of going into an event and being the only woman in the room. That has definitely not been the case. I mean, clearly we're not gathering right now, but I would say that it's always 50-50, if not skewed. That you don't, I have never experienced feeling uncomfortable because I am a female in a room full of men. I've just never had that experience, but that really is a testament to all the people that have come before that have made it that way. And then I stepped into the chair role again, not because I was a woman, but more because I saw a lot of big businesses serving in that role, whereas as a chamber, we had more members that were small business members. And so I stepped up for the chair role because I was a small business person. And I wanted other small businesses to see that we could serve in that capacity, and that the chamber really was there for our voice and to advocate for small businesses as well.
I really appreciate that. And I resonate with me, because I know when I started my first small business in Morinville, the first thing I did is pay my $100 to the town for a business license and my $100 to the chamber next door to be a part of that organization, because I felt like the networking that it offered, the opportunities to have discussions was invaluable to me as a small business. So I definitely can understand where you're coming from. And I think a lot of people may not see the value. And it's great to be able to have someone express that totally, that it's not just large businesses that are out there, that the membership is varied and vast.
You know, and I've not been a part of this, but I would say that as a small business, the value that the chamber brings in terms of the advocacy efforts. I mean, I could never call up the premier or the minister of health and say, hey, you want to hear my opinion? But the chamber can do that. And so that unified voice that the chamber brings on behalf of businesses in terms of advocacy, educating its members, connecting its members. I mean, I could go on and on about the benefits of the chamber. I'm just a big believer.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think, speaking of advocacy, one thing that is definitely very timely is the fact that we have been living through this global pandemic and COVID-19. And one of the largest impacts that we've seen on that is the impact on women. Women in the workforce, the fact that so many people have been struggling with the balance between childcare and home and work. And it's just going to be something that's going to take us decades to recover from. And so, Janet, I just wanted to throw it over to you to see, like, what are some thoughts around how we're going to be able to support women, especially women business owners, through this next few years as we deal with this?
Well, you're right, Lisa. You know, the women have been particularly marginalized by COVID-19, and I think it's going to prove very problematic for a long time to come. Really, what we have to do, you know, the chamber is advocating now for flexible childcare arrangements and affordable childcare. We have to continue to champion that, to make it easier. I mean, look what's happened. Even in this last shutdown, you know, women all went home again. And how do you do your job and educate your children and deal with all of the challenges that are going on from home every day. I don't know, they're my heroes. I can't imagine having to deal with that and continue to further your business goals, your workforce goals. Some have just had to step out completely. We have to advocate for flexibility for workers. We have to advocate and heavily support those places or those individuals that are prepared to step up and mentor and give a hand up right now and make sure that we're lifting all peoples at the same time. Because if we don't get this right, and if we don't blend our economic side with our social side, then we just don't have a full recovery. And if we don't have a full recovery, I don't know where we go. I don't know what success looks like, because we really need to lift everybody at the same time. And if we do, we can emerge from this challenge healthier than before, with better attitudes. I mean, the one thing that this pandemic brought the vulnerabilities of our community front and center, right? Put them right in front of us. And we're dealing with it. And we need to continue to recognize it as an issue, a problem, something to be solved.
And there's definitely, I think, a role for the Edmonton Chamber to play there as the voice, not just for business, but for women, and to advocate to the province and the municipal governments for continuing to consider them as they make changes and go through and talk about recovery.
You know, as John said, we are a collective voice. We have a lot of partnerships. We have a lot of relationships that allow us to bring together people, to be thought conveners, and then to take that information and communicate it out to audiences widely, but also to all orders of government on what they can do to start contributing to the solutions. We need to find and work on solutions.
It's a really great point. And Dawn, I'd love to throw it to you as a small business owner, if you had any thoughts on how the Chamber and other small businesses and women can support each other in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with Janet. There's going to be challenges to come. And a lot of my friends and colleagues are small business owners. And it is a challenge because, you know, as far as we've come, and certainly in my situation, there's still some traditional roles that husbands and wives and men and women play, where the woman is still that child rearer and the comfort giver. And so in a situation like we're in right now, where mom is so suddenly having to also be the educator, there is definitely some challenges to overcome. And how can we support homeschooling? I mean, I don't know going forward if this is going to be more of a normal thing. You know, if people are going to choose to keep their children at home, that will impact women who had previously thought they could start a business. Because make no mistake, there is still that balancing act between wanting to be a mom, being a business owner. And the pandemic has definitely made that more challenging. And I know that the Chamber will do its best to help. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those things where everyone sort of has to pitch in at all levels of government and all organizations to ensure that we're listening and ensuring that all voices are heard. And, you know, I'm really interested in hearing a perspective, because I think through COVID, we're going to see a lot of conversation about municipal governments and costing and budgets. And as a former mayor, I can tell you that I had a really interesting relationship with the Chamber of Commerce when I was elected. Our council did. You know, it's something where they love you one day and they don't the next, and it's always a little bit confrontational, but in a good way. It should be, because I think that the Chamber as an advocate organization has a really incredible role to be able to challenge a municipal council and to step up and talk to them about what their visions are for the city, and you know, what kind of projects they're looking for to be funded and what businesses need. And obviously the two of you in the past, I read articles about how you stood up and talked during budget time to city council and advocated for what businesses needed. I just also wanted to see your perspective on that. So Janet, like, what do you think with the municipal election coming up? What do you think are some of the issues that are going to be hot issues that need to be discussed, or things that are not even going to be on people's radar that should be for candidates, especially?
Well, first of all, I'll say, Lisa, and you know, I recognize on councils, you're right. There's a healthy friction or dynamic, right, between the community and between their elected officials, and there should be. But what we really need to recognize is that what we should be is productive partners, not just a lot of noise. We need to be prepared as the chamber, as any organization, to put our backs into it as well. And that's why, you know, when we embarked last time on the cities establishing their 4-year budget process, I actually hired somebody to do research, to start providing that ability for us to make really concrete suggestions back into City Hall about things that we saw that they could address. To their credit, they've addressed many of those things. But we're going to continue to talk now about, you know, taxes. We recognize that, and it's going to be a problem for all governments, right? They've been stepping up and doing as much as they can to assist our community and our world as much as they can, and continue to try to keep us rolling and businesses up and operational. But there are tax implications for that. And if we start to consider raising taxes, it's going to be a big problem for a business community that has had really no revenue streams and very little customer interaction for 18 months. And we started this, don't forget, with 6 years of an economic downturn. So businesses were already hurting. That's a problem. Red tape, we've done a great job cutting red tape. That's going to continue to be an issue, though. We hear stories every day of frustration, especially as businesses are trying to pivot on a dime to ensure that they can get to that point where they can be reactive as we've got shutdowns or restrictions. What do? I've got to find a patio. I've got to, you know, get a new way of distributing my product or my service. So we need the flexibility of government for that. And most certainly that happens with our municipal government a lot. It's on their shoulders. And then homelessness. We have a problem in downtown Edmonton in particular. Our downtown, it honestly looks like it's been abandoned. And we have to figure out how to breathe new life into our downtown, because the core is really, you know, the region really needs a very strong core, and that is Edmonton's downtown, and then flow out to all of our region to support all of the community. We need to deal with our homelessness issues. We need to look at what we can do to find supportive housing, not tents. We need to look at what we can do to find the supports that people need to get them off the streets and into an environment where they can begin to heal and grow. And, you know, ultimately, we love those success stories where we hear them become part of the community again. And we need to participate in that and make that happen. So I'd say those are the areas that are going to be front and center for our municipal politicians as we embark on this next election.
I appreciate that. And I think one thing that I was reflecting on earlier today was the fact that you and I met 6 years ago at a Northern Alberta Mayors and Reeves meeting in Fort McMurray. And as you talk about the region and how important it is to address some of these issues like homelessness as a region, it's something that you walk the walk. Like, you actually went up to Fort McMurray to meet with the Northern mayors so that you could talk about some of those large issues that Edmonton needs support on. So I just wanted to make sure you knew how much I appreciate the work that you did when I was a regional mayor, and I know that they do as well now. And you're right. I mean, there's so many issues that are going to need to be addressed, and obviously candidates are going to be discussing those. Dawn, to throw it to you, small businesses. I mean, I can imagine that there's a lot of commentary around that municipal election, or maybe even some things from the federal election, which we are probably going to be seeing this fall as well. Right. Do you have anything specific that you think that candidates should be focusing on?
Well, in addition to Janet's, great points, what I'm hearing from other business owners, and I'm part of another group called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. And, the main issues that I'm hearing is about taxes and fiscal responsibility. And, you know, I think somebody said very early on that there will be a fiscal reckoning come the end of this pandemic. And I do not envy city councillors or provincial MLAs or anybody in politics. It's going to be a tough go in the coming years with budgets shrinking and all sorts of debt to pay off. So, you know, I honor, you know, the councillors that stand up and do this very tough work, because it is going to be challenging. And so what I hear from other small business owners is really around fiscal responsibility and making sure that spending is in line with the needs. So we cannot, you know, businesses that have been shut down for 18 months, and even those of us that kept running, we had increased costs, substantial increased costs. And so it was a very tough situation, and, you know, increased taxes just should not even be entertained. We're going to have to be able to find a way to do more with less. And there's going to be some really tough decisions. And so, you know, what I'm hearing from certainly my colleagues who own businesses is they're looking for a mayor who's going to be able to make those tough decisions rather than issues of concern. It's just going to be tough.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see the commentary, and I think both of you are going to play key roles in ensuring that the business voices are heard, but also, I mean, as the chamber goes, I'm assuming they're going to have a large scale sort of attack against the municipal election to ensure that the priorities are listened to, but also that the facts are clear, because that's also something that we find a lot of, is that during elections, things kind of get skewed and people have their own opinions and their own interpretation of how things should be. And it'll be really interesting to see how it all unfolds moving forward. One other thing that I was really interested in is obviously we are brought together by Izena Ross, and the commentary that there are amazing stories of women in Edmonton. And we hear about a few of them. We don't hear about all of them, obviously. And the business sector, the successes that women have there, the profiles of women in business are maybe not heard as much as some of the others that we've heard in the past. And so I just wondered, especially with you, Dawn, like working in seniors assisted care and living, like most of the research that I've done on this project has been on those women who lived in a completely different time, a different space. And when we started getting into the late 1940s, we were talking about the women that were working alongside my grandmother, who was in Edmonton and working as a stenographer. You obviously, Dawn, would have a lot of experience hearing these stories. And I just wondered if you had any that resonated with you personally, or if you had any advice for how we can really lift up those women's stories and share them more frequently.
Lisa, I have so many. I just don't have time to share them all or pick which ones are better than the others. But, you know, two of these seniors that we've cared for through the years, I'll quickly tell you their stories. So one of the ladies, and she has since passed, but she lived with us for about 5 or 6 years. She was one of the first individuals in Edmonton, or in I think Canada, to have an online bookstore. So she's in her 70s and she's got an online bookstore. She had an in-person bookstore. And this lady at the age of, I think it was about 78, was scheduled to go to Australia to play basketball in the World Seniors Games. Just like an amazing woman, like super dynamic. She well known throughout the community, and suffered a stroke, a catastrophic stroke. And the only reason that she probably survived that is her dog was barking. And so the neighbors, you know, went over and found this lady, and she lived with us for about 5 years. And just her stories, even though she was somewhat cognitively impaired following that stroke, it was just phenomenal. She was a phenomenal lady. And to live that late into her years and to be a contributing member of society, I have no doubt that had it not been for that stroke, she'd probably still have that bookstore today, like well into her 80s. Another lady that is still a resident with us today, her husband passed away very, very, very young. And so she took on this huge multi-million-dollar steel company and ran it up until the day that she also had a catastrophic stroke. And so there are a lot of women running very significant businesses, and I just honor each of them. Some of them have even built those businesses on their own, like right from scratch. Others inherited it from their father or a husband that passed away, but lots of stories. And, you know, I hope that they won't mind, but there's a group of ladies in town, and they've created a sort of an organization called Seniors of Humanity. And if you get a chance to check that out, they're just telling stories of seniors.
Which is probably some of the most interesting and dynamic stories that we could hear. Like I would love to hear more of those. I hope that we'll get an opportunity through the Chamber social media or the YW social media to share some of these female leadership stories, because it's just the things that they had to deal with that we obviously wouldn't fully understand. Like the fact that they had struggles and changes. I think of Ethel Wilson. She was an amazing city council story. She was elected, young children that she had, but she actually came from working in the meatpacking plants. She was a seamstress there. Her husband had left her, so she was a single mom, and she was working up through the ranks of the labor union. They told her to run for council, so she did. So she continued to work at the plant while she was on city council, and then she ran for MLA and she was all three things at the same time for years. And with little kids, I could not imagine. So I love the opportunity to be able to lift these women up, and hopefully we'll continue to find ways to do that, because they obviously were trailblazers for us in so many ways. And I just wanted to also let everybody know that feel free to jump into the Q&A and throw a question up there. We're about to come into a Q&A period, so please do, or just review the ones that are in there and upvote them if there's something that you would like to see me ask these two lovely ladies. And speaking of trailblazers and obviously glass ceiling shatterers, Ms. Riopel, it is announced that you will be leaving your position at the end of the month, which I'm very sad about, but obviously well-deserved to be able to move on. I just wondered, we are, like we said, we're telling these women's stories. They don't have a chance to tell their own. And I feel very sad about that and this mantle of responsibility, but also an inspiring piece of this project has been, how can we change that in the future? How can we ensure that women document their stories and they leave a legacy and a commentary about their lives that they own? And so I just kind of wondered from you what you feel like the legacy pieces that you're the most proud of in the time that you worked with the Chamber, and if you have any just general advice that you'd like to give to women about what it's like to be a leader or how they can get involved through boards or committees, anything of the sort.
Thanks, Lisa. So I don't tell my own story very well, and I was well aware of that when my team didn't even know about how I got on the Chamber board. I've worked with them for almost 7 years, and I'm not very good at that. I just, when we're talking about all of this, I just keep thinking, I think it's really important that we honor our past, that we don't forget it, that we understand fully where women have come from and what's happened. I think it's really important, to Dawn's point, that we ask our senior community what they've done and where they came from and get their stories, because again, we don't hear them enough. And some have benefit of maybe a grandparent that tells a story, but maybe that grandparent wasn't involved in the community in a sort of trailblazer way. But I assure you, we have lots of people. But let's not forget our past, and let's figure it out and document it. But let's move forward. And we've got to move forward, and we've got to put our back into our community. It needs us desperately, and it always has. So I've got a ton of volunteer experience. As I moved through my life, I realized that I didn't have a lot of money to give to charities, but I sure had energy and enthusiasm and passion. And so I just would jump in and I would get involved, and I would try to help wherever I could. And that afforded me all kinds of opportunities that quite honestly became almost selfish, because they gave me back as much as I could give to the organization or the cause. And as a result of that, I've built some friendships and relationships and a reputation that I never could have. And I did all of that at no cost, except for my time and my passion and my commitment. And I also then developed relationships where people tried to reach out to me and give me a hand up or teach me about things. I'm very, very good at governance, but I learned a lot of that not through schooling. I learned a lot of that for observing and watching people. So we need to be really curious. We need to not hesitate to ask for help. We need to not hesitate to say, I don't know that answer and I need help. And we need to reach out and build our networks. Do that everywhere you can, and don't just make them female networks, because then we're just as bad as the old boys. Make them inclusive networks, make them diverse networks, and own them.
Absolutely. I love to tell the story that I am a product of a library board. That's where I got started when it comes to jump off to municipal to politics, and just how important a volunteer time on a board and learning governance skills from people who have come before you really is. So yeah, I definitely resonate with that for sure. And it ties into some of these questions which have come in, and I think they're pretty amazing. So why don't we get started with this? The first one is, what is your advice for women or gender diverse people who want to join a board but don't know where to start? So Dawn, do you have some advice for them?
You know, the best thing that I would say, and I've sat on 3 boards and I'm sort of signing up for a couple more, is to start with your passion. So if you're passionate about something, start there and, you know, take a look. There's lots of boards around the city that are looking for help. The other thing that I would highly recommend is to take, you know, learning by example and watching other people is important, but as well, if you can take some sort of course on governance. And so I've done 2. I did one through the Faculty of Extension with the University of Alberta on small and medium enterprise governance. And then just recently through the ICD designation, did a not-for-profit governance. And that teaches you so much. And it just gives you probably a little bit more confidence to approach a board and say, hey, I've got this course. I understand what governance is. I understand how boards work. But first and foremost, start with something that you're really passionate about, and just reach out and just say, hey, I want to contribute. And sometimes you may contribute by starting on a committee. And that's a great way to get to know that organization and then work your way into the board seat.
That's a really amazing point. And I think one thing that a lot of people talk about the ICD, or the Institute of Corporate Directors, and obviously they have a lot of training and things that are really great, but you don't have to take the full training to start off on a board, because they have had people say that, like, are they looking to have something where you've gone and done all of the education and paid a lot of money to get on a board? I think from what you're saying, no, like you just jump onto something that you love and work your way up.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, one of the first boards that I sat on, I think it was about the same time as the Chamber, was a local minor sports organization. So something I was really passionate about because my kid plays baseball. And so we actually started that organization. So to start an organization from nothing, to create a board, to understand why you need, you know, E&O insurance. And in terms of the ICD, they do have a full board governance, which is pretty pricey, I think, but that allows you to sit on publicly traded boards. The shorter course, which is the not-for-profit board governance, is much more easy to get, and just really will help you in terms of understanding how to sit on that board and what are the proper protocols and processes. But you don't need it. I mean, you absolutely don't need it for a lot of boards. They're willing to teach you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's extremely important information and valuable for people to know. So Janet, obviously you sat on some pretty high profile boards, United Way and Edmonton Oilers Community Foundation. Did you get started working on a community league or a minor sports or some sort of board like that? Like what's been your journey on boards and the advice you would give on that?
Yeah, okay, well, no, I started out being the treasurer of the kindergarten parent association, and then, you know, the social convener for the parent advisory council for schools. And I loved pottery, so I became a potter, but I also then became the president of my potting group because they needed some work on location. Actually, it was funny, but every time I got really passionate about something, I would step up, and I still can't help myself. If something needs more energy, more involvement, more engagement, somehow I end up stepping up and going, I'll do it. And when you do that, you get other people that say, well, I will too, I'll help you. And you become this little machine that goes and attacks and gets things done, just as Dawn said, starting an organization because her kids needed it. And I just kept moving from that. But you know, a lot of that, as I'd said earlier, I looked at Rotary and said, I want a service organization that speaks to my heart. It spoke to a lot more than that. I really started to feel like I was making a big difference in a broader, much bigger community. And I've constantly leapt about. I went to McEwen's board. I applied twice for McEwen's board with the government. And when I got on the board finally, it was my community because I'm an adult learner. So that was a community of largely female students who were adult learners who, just like me, had little kids at home and needed to continue to further their education and understand what really unleash their future potential. So I worked my way. Next thing I knew, I was asked if I would take the chair of that board. United Way, how could you not jump into United Way and realize that the significant contribution that they make and want to be part of the leadership of that? Edmonton Oilers Community Foundation, the millions and millions of dollars that they inject right here in our community to make big difference, to have huge impact. How could you not want to be part of that? So I've just stepped up. Sometimes I've had someone reach out and pull me in, but I've not hesitated. But you don't get paid for that. And I don't need to get paid for that. What I need to do is feel like I'm making a difference. I'm making a contribution. And it is my greatest reward.
Yeah, I feel the same way about the organizations that I've been a part of. And isn't it interesting too, like the learnings that you get that you don't expect? Because I fully believe that the reason that I could be a mayor is because I had been involved in a parent council, because that was probably more political than politics. Like it was pretty crazy, but it's been an amazing place to learn.
Absolutely.
Important. Catherine has asked, what are your thoughts on mentorship and sponsorship when it comes to helping more women reach corporate boardrooms and leadership positions? Janet, do you have some thoughts on that?
I can tell you that I've had a great many mentors, and they were very, very important to me as I move forward. And I highly encourage that. But we have to recognize that mentors don't stand on pillars in the middle of a room and you look at them as a god. A mentor can be a number of different people, can give you one piece of advice that you'll never forget and that you've always put into play. Or they can be the person that was awful to you and you watched it and said, I will never do that, ever. I will never treat someone like that. That is, again, mentorship. You're learning how to conduct your own life, and you're building relationships or not. I think it's really important that we don't put our mentors on pedestals and that we reach out and say, I only need you for one meeting. I mentor a few women, but that only call on me once a year, maybe, to just bounce stuff off of. I have no idea. I don't even know how much impact I have, but I sure like the idea that I can share stories with them and hopefully can be of some value to them.
It's really important. And it's funny, someone told me once that you have mentors and you have anti-mentors, and that does align with what you're saying.
Anti-mentors, that's a great way to capture that.
Yeah, you have to seek that out. I also got told that if you want to be a good board chair, you have to seek out both a good board chair to watch and go to one that you don't think is as good, so you can learn what to do and what not to do. So obviously, Dawn, as a board chair, I can imagine you had a lot of learning. Is there opportunities that you've had to either be a mentor or have a mentor in your life?
Well, first I will say, make no mistake, Janet, the people who call on you once or twice a year they're learning. So much. And I did have somebody reach out to me and she actually said to me, would you be my mentor? And I was a little bit taken aback. I was like, really? Like, why do you want me as your mentor? I don't know what I can teach you. But since I said, sure, you know what, call me anytime. What I try and do, and I think I get this from my experience with the EO organization, is I share my experience. So you're having a concern or something's come up in your world, and this is a similar situation that I've had, and this is how I've addressed it. I try not to tell people what to do, but I just say, this is how I have addressed that. And in terms of my role in the chamber, there were many, many, many great chairs that came before me, and I learned so very much from them. And in addition to that, Janet really was a mentor to me in my role as the chair. I mean, she has so much experience and she mentored me through that experience. And, I learned from the best. So I look forward to my next board role And I'm one of those people that loves to get involved. And, you know, somebody said to me once, you know, it's the STP, it's the same 10 people that you see, because those are the people that want to get involved. They're always the ones stepping up, and that's who I am. And if you want to make a difference, you just got to get involved. So.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that's a really great point. One of the questions that has been asked has commented on the fact that we've talked about municipal governments, and we've talked about women and looking at different roles that they play, but we haven't addressed specifically Indigenous women. The idea that First Nations, Métis, Indigenous women can have some barriers to moving forward in both business and in leadership positions. And is there anything that you know of, Janet, that you could offer as advice or support specifically to that group or other underrepresented groups that are not really as involved in the city as they could be if barriers were removed?
Well, I think we're all responsible for reducing those barriers and knocking them down, and we're responsible for putting our energy into that and speaking up. So, you know, one of our problems, and it has been ever thus, is not speaking up. So you have to speak up with respect, though. You have to speak up with some concrete examples. You know, I had a teacher in high school, I guess, it said, don't sit there and complain about things, find a solution, and then make your complaint and put your solution forward. I see Glynis Buffalo is here on the call, and Glynis is one of my most treasured mentees, and she has been as much a teacher to me as I have been to her. But it's very, very important that we listen to people and understand where they have a fit, what they can do. Glynis has made tremendous contributions into our community in so many ways, and so many of the women, no doubt, on this call have done that. But realize that you've got to continue to lift others. This is not an easy process, but we can't, again, we have to be respectful. We have to provide solutions or uncover solutions together. It's the only way to move forward.
Completely, I couldn't agree more. I think that this is a great opportunity for us to move that conversation forward and a starting point on how women can work together, women, diverse people, everyone that can work together on what they want to do to ensure that people are supported as they move into leadership roles. I really appreciate the conversation with both of you. I have learned a lot, and I've been inspired by the work that each of you have done in your careers and the support that you've given to other women, but also the service that you offered in the time. Like you said, it's not always something that's paid, it's something that you give your heart and soul into, and each of you have done that and really lifted the business community up. So thank you so much for today. And I'll turn it back to Erin to close us off.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks so much for making me part of this today.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And to our panelists, I just have to say, wow, I wish this conversation could go on much longer. And I think we just scratched the surface. A couple takeaways for me. Number one is obviously the power of stories. And I think to Janet's point, knowing our past is often really, really important to help us propel us to our future, or the future we want to create together. And the other point, or the other takeaway for me today, is the power of getting involved. And hopefully many of the listeners today are inspired to get involved in whatever way that looks for them, and putting their voices forward. So important as we move forward. So on behalf of the YWCA Edmonton and the Searching for Izena project, I want to thank our moderator, Lisa Holmes, and our two distinguished panelists, Janet Riopel and Don Harsh, for your time, wisdom, and insights. It was an inspiring conversation and a great recap of history of female leadership in our city's business community. We've seen a lot of progress, but there's still so much work to do. Lastly, thank you to all those at home or wherever you are today for joining us today. Please stay in touch by visiting the YWCA Edmonton website or searchingforizena.com, which is one word, to find out more about the Searching for Izena project or to get involved. We appreciate your support and interest. Together, we can all get more women elected. And for those who don't know, it's a municipal election year this year, or sitting at important decision-making tables across our city, because representation does matter. To build stronger, healthier, and equal communities, we need our elected bodies and decision-making tables to look like the community that they serve. So have a great day. Thanks again for watching.